they were in the same kambu with me, and they were talking about, one of them asked the other one that, where did she get her phone from? I was listening to their conversation, even though that wasn't right, but I was interested.
You were eavesdropping,
yes.
Okay.
So the girl, the friend asked her where she had the phone from, and she said, oh, that guy bought it for her. And she was like, how much? What did she do? And he gave the phone to her. And he said the other time he bought me food. And in the Upper West region, we have some 2 main branches which are popular when it comes to this fast food. And one of them mentioned one of the fast food companies' names, and that's the guy bought the food from there for her, and she was able to give, like, open her legs, let me put it that way, for the guy. And the guy gave the phone to her, and the phone wasn't even working. And she was now sending it to the market to go and repair. Yes, please.
So she had the phone in exchange for a sexual
yes, please.
favor.
And
okay.
These things are, it's not because she wants to do it. Some of them, they need guidance and they need mentorship. And some of them, they are not empowered, they are not educated, and they don't have the mind or the mindset of saying no or being assertive. So these are some of the things which are happening in the Upper West region.
Okay. So, Dr. Odwe, she's also given us some perspectives in the Upper West region, but you are a research fellow, and I believe you've worked extensively on this subject. Why do men perpetrate violence against women? I mean, what even gives them that support system? I mean, can you describe the environment in which we are and the systems that make them, empower them to perpetrate these forms of violence against women?
Thank you. I think from her submission, she's highlighted a number of them, though she didn't name them. One key thing is women's dependence on men, economic dependence on men, emotional dependence on men. So through our socialization, what do we tell women? What can you do? What can you not do? Who are you supposed to depend on or rely on? And most often we've given power to provide to men. And because of that, they are the ones we train at school, they are the ones that income earners, breadwinners. And because they have the economic power, it makes it easy for them to dictate their pace. And this is one of the reasons why, because a lot of women, if you're married, you're supposed to rely on your husband for chop money, as we call it in Ghana. And so if you're dependent on that person every time, it makes you vulnerable, because he determines at what point you have to get money and when not, and what he can do. And so our norms, you mentioned earlier that they've internalized these things, so they've normalized them. What do we tell men during socialization? What do we tell women? So, for example, if a woman is if a girl child is misbehaving, or being disobedient, one thing we tell her is that if you don't stop, when you grow up, your husband will beat you. Your husband will bring you back home. Okay. What does that tell the male child? When a girl grows up and is married to me, I can beat her. I can discipline her, so your husband will discipline you. And these are the things that give them power, authority, control over women, and what they can do. And also we tell women must be submissive. When when your partner is doing something to you, you just keep quiet, contain it. And this message is cut across all spheres of life. What our friends tell us when we go to tell them about situations that we are going through. What our pastors tell us. Marriages, what do we tell women? Never keep yourself from a man. So if a woman is even in pain or in menses, sometimes they even cannot have sex. But then if you make that, they'll say, if you go to the extent of saying, I cannot have sex today, then the man can step in and say that you are denying me of my rights. So I did my research, master's research on marital rape. And then the assumption is that men have sexual rights and they determine when we can have sex and when we cannot have sex.
But women don't?
No. Okay. Women cannot determine. So those are the perceptions in society, and this is because this is what we are telling people right from childhood to their adult stage. When guys meet, what are the conversations they have when women meet? Oh, don't worry, men are like that. When he grows, he will change. Oh, if you don't do this, he will not do that. So we always make it look as if that they have the power. And research has also shown that because of these, that we give this power and the things we tell men, for example, men as the provider. So even he's not able to provide the things that he's supposed to, he psychologically and emotionally he's affected, and he uses violence as a way of reinstating the power in the house. So he says, oh, women are vulnerable and they don't have, so if they're educated, Educated women also face violence now because now men feel less powerful because the women take control over their spaces. So how do I get back my masculinity? How do I take up the space as a man? Then they use violence as a way, we call it masculinity capital. Then they use violence as a means of. So our basic problem has been socialization and what we tell men and women what they can do, what they cannot do, and how they use those messages. Yeah.
So, I mean, women are also socialized to endure these pain.
Yeah.
You found out that. Okay, so let me come back to you, Hikmat. I mean, one thing I forgot to say is that you're still a student at the University of Ghana, a level 300 student, and I'm sure most of what you've discovered in the Upper West region is informing what you're studying. And probably your thesis that you're about to write. Anyway, so I mean, Dr. Odwe mentioned the fact that women are so dependent on their husbands, and even those who are even educated are even abused. Do you find that in the Upper West region where the girl child is probably shut down because they don't have the rights, and they are supposed to always service their men? I mean, they are the mercy of the men. Is that what you discovered?
Yes, please. And
even the children?
Yes, please. And even myself.
Okay.
Because growing up in a traditional home in the northern settings is not easy, especially when you are a girl. And I have faced some of these things. And even though I'm educated in a way, and I've gone to school, my mind is open now, but I still face some of these challenges. So even though I earlier mentioned that because the women are not educated, they are subjected to abuse and other things. Women who are educated or girls who are even educated still go through these issues. And I'm saying that I'm an example because even last vacation when I went home, I faced a challenge like that, and it's because I'm a female in the Upper West region. If not, we have males who are in the Upper West region. Why is it that these issues are not happening to them? And even if these issues are happening to them, they are not common. They are not common like how it happens to girls and women. So it's not only about being educated that you'll be subjected to abuse or violence.
So, Dr. Odwe, we've been talking about gender-based violence over and over and over again. Why can't it go away? I mean, we expect that the situation would be improved by now.
Okay, so I think the first thing I'll say is that because as a society, we have not come to accept the fact that violence against women is wrong. Okay. Because once again, through our socialization, we have normalized these things. So it makes it very difficult for us to accept it. Even when we have put in place laws, some of these laws are based on ratified laws, international laws, and not necessarily because we are ready to fight or make changes to suit us. And so if we don't come together as a society to understand that when you abuse a woman, it has consequences, or when you abuse a girl child or anybody in society, it has consequences. There's no way we are going to make a headway. We can have the best of laws because the will to implement these things is even a problem. We've had people going to service providers and they get there and they get victimized. So victim blaming becomes like, what did you do is the first question we ask. What happened is not even important to them. So the assumption is that wherever violence occurs is because the woman has done something wrong. And because society has made that if a woman goes against a man, that is when he has to use that power, that abuse. And because of that, every time we think that there's something wrong that a woman did. And that is where our problem is. Until we address it, until we all come to the recognition that whatever form of abuse against whoever it is wrong and needs to be tackled as a society, there's no way we are going to make a headway.
I'm even told now women are even subjected to online violence. They are facing online violence, not just sexual or physical or economic abuse. So it looks as if as we are tackling one thing, another thing also rears its ugly head. Yeah. But you mentioned the laws and some of the systems that we've tried to implement, yet the problem still persists. Can you share with us what has gone amiss? I mean, you know, these laws that we've rectified, we have now DOFSU and all that. Can you tell us what has gone amiss when it comes to the whole equation, that we still have domestic violence or violence against women in particular still pervasive in our society?
The first thing is our understanding or what value we place on women. Do we find women to be important in society? Do we find them to be equal partners in the development of society? Or we find them to be at the lower pace, and therefore it's men that rule, and so whatever they do, it's allowed. Until we place value on women, there's no way we are going to be able to solve it, because somebody can just say, she's a woman, ignore her. Women are emotional, and women are not rational, and those stress causes around who women are and what we can do to them is the key reason why, because we have these laws. Another reason is also education and awareness. So she mentioned education. Formal education is not enough to stop abuse. And education on what steps you can take and what you can do, how to access your rights, is a key thing to address it. So my awareness of what can be done to me, what is allowed, what is permitted, what is not permitted, where I can get help is important. Also our values and then our language in society. You know, these implementers of these laws are members of society. Whatever we say is what they take to the offices and their spaces. It's very difficult to separate themselves from it because they build these ideologies over time. And that's how come you can go to DOSU and then you enter and the first thing somebody will ask you is, Uknabo. So, like, because you should know that when you get to that space, you are no more a member of society. You are there to ensure that there's rights that are appropriately observed and recognized, and all these things are very important. So what education are we giving to our lawmakers? What education are we giving to the service providers? What messages are we telling men, women, and all those things? So that's how somebody can say that as for women, you can, so far as you have money, you can get them. And this is not a language for poor people alone. This is not a language for young boys alone. This is a language for men, big men, businessmen. And that's how come sexual harassment in the workplaces exist. I'm sure wherever you find yourself in Ghana, you have women that have experienced, even in parliament, I'm sure there are women that may have experienced sexual and gender-based violence in line of their work and all that. And that's because right from the beginning, we have not placed value on women and their worth. We've only sexualized their bodies. And so far as we've sexualized women, the only thing we think they are good for is sex and abuse and all those things. So until we address them, there's no way we are going to be able to do this.
Not many people even see sexual harassment, not even just sexual harassment, but harassment of women in the office space or in any public space as a form of abuse. They see it as normal.
That's because we've normalized it. So you can have an adult see a little girl and say, my wife, I'll marry you. And then the little girl will tell you, I don't like that. And then it's normal. People say, oh, stop it, he's just joking. He's not. That is grooming. He's grooming the little girl. And so one day you find out that he's touched the girl inappropriately or has forced sex on the girl. And he will say, oh, but I had always said it. So sometimes we have to stop it. As soon as such messages start coming up, you stop it. And that's it.
Okay. So Hikmat, as a youth activist who I wouldn't say is a victim of violence, but you grew up in such a society and you realized that this is wrong. So you decided to be a voice for the vulnerable women and children in your traditional area. God bless you for that.
Yeah.
But can you tell me what you do for such women, for such children? Even in your case, what did you do to snap out of it, to grow out of it?
Okay, growing up, as I said, I wasn't exposed to materials that will enhance my knowledge or broaden my horizon to know some of these issues. But in primary 6, for instance, I had the chance to read a book which was about this abuse against women and young girls, rape and all those things. So after reading that book, it opened up my mind. I got to realize that even what I was going through at home was all forms of abuse because I was a girl, and maybe because I was living in that home, because I wasn't the only girl, I wasn't the only child they gave birth to, but I faced some of these things. They wanted to deny me the chance to go to school and all that, but the book really taught me a lot. So that was when I started thinking about what I can do to help other young girls. So when I go to senior high school, I became part of one club, and they taught us how to speak up and all those things. And after senior high school, I started forming groups of young girls. I tell them what we learn and all those things. And from there, I picked up and I came to the university. During the coronavirus break, I was at home doing nothing. I went to do voluntary work somewhere, and it wasn't really easy for me. The men over there, they were really harassing me and all that. I had to run away, even though it was something I wanted to learn from, but I had to run away. And I went home, and all the time I was depressed because anywhere I go is the same issue, the same old issue. So I sat down and to think about what I can do to help myself. And I knew I wasn't the only girl going through that, so I formed Hikisun Joy. And I also told a few friends who were interested, and we started raising awareness against gender-based violence issues in the Upper West region. Then I came to join Pelco Consult, who I am representing Pelco Consult today, and they are into harnessing resources and young people to addressing gender-related issues in the Upper West region. So we are a voice for the voiceless, and we are using drama. We go to various communities to perform drama in our local languages to educate the rural community members about the effects or consequences of denying the girl child's rights. And also some of these violence or abuses young girls and women go through in these communities. We also do mentorship. We go to schools, especially in the rural communities, and we talk to young girls, because I have noticed that growing up, if some people had a chance to get people to look up to or to hear one or two words of encouragement, they wouldn't become survivors of gender-based violence. So in doing this, we helped save some girls who were even given out to for marriage because of financial issues. We made the parents to understand that giving their child to a man who is even old enough to be a father wouldn't solve their financial problems. So it's better they get their girl and child educated or their female educated to help break the tide of poverty they are facing. So in the Upper West region, this is basically what we do.
Okay. I mean, I was going to ask you the response you had. I mean, you mentioned the attacks from some bigwigs in the society, but you should know that this is not just peculiar to your home. It's a reflection of what the society or the traditional area has been accustomed to. So it's not just peculiar to your home. But in terms of response, I'd like to ask you, how did the women and the children respond to some of these awareness methods that you introduced them to? Was it enough to empower them? Were they able now to speak up when their husbands or the men spoke against their rights or downplayed their rights? What was their response?
Okay, comparing 2021 to 2022, 2020
to 2021, okay.
We've seen a great or a huge change or difference, because we've gone to communities where we saw so many issues, especially which were meted out to young girls, gender-based violence issues. But after our next visit, we realized that even some of the men, the community men, came out to support us. There was a community we went to, and the people, we went to talk to even the women. We actually went to talk to the community people. But when we got there, we didn't see any woman there. So we asked the men where the women were, and they told us that they are at the back. So we were like, at the back doing what there? We've come to talk to the community people, because the community is not made up of only men. Women are also involved. And one of them commented about, what are we even going to tell the women? What can they do? And I told them that
because the decision makers are the men. Okay.
And I told them that if the women are not involved, nothing good will even come out of what we've come to do. And we also need the men to support us, because we won't be able to achieve what we've come to do if the men don't support us. So we talked and we debated on it, and even the people were not agreeing, the men, they were not agreeing. But upon our next visit, we saw a very great difference. The men were supporting us, and some of them really accepted the fact that they were ignorant and they didn't know that women could also take part in decision making, or it was necessary to send girls to school. So it has been a great
difference,
yes,
and the response has been high.
Yes.
So, Dr. Audrey, let me come back to you because you have also, I mean, the center you work for deals a lot with these issues. She tells us that they do advocacy, but is advocacy enough in mitigating violence against women and girls?
Okay. Yes, so the center I work with at University of Cape Coast, we call Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation. For us, we believe that whatever gender issues we are looking at should be addressed from 3 key angles. Research that will inform policies, that will inform advocacy, and also documenting those for advocacy and to make people aware this is the current situation and this is where next we are going to. So is advocacy an effective tool? Very much. Because it is the only point where you're able to make known what exists and what has been done and what else we can do. It's only also at that level that you're able to speak to people at their level to understand what the issues are. So each target group will be different. So when you have the same research finding, you will speak to it differently when you get different target groups. If you get to children, you know how to talk about it. If you get to adults. Yeah, so it's one key way of disseminating and making the issues known. It is also an avenue where you get feedback from what is existing and what can be done about it. So I have the research, I have the information, I have the laws. And I think that, okay, these laws are neutral and applicable everywhere until I go to the people to tell them that, okay, this is the law that exists. This is what it says it can be done. You can never know how the societal structures at the various spaces may make it even impossible for people to be able to access those legal structures and all. It is also at that point that you're able to break down the issues to the understanding of the people. So, for example, we'll think that there's a law. It's okay. If you educate people, they will understand. Then you get to a community and you realize that even to get to women to talk is a problem. Now they've realized that men are decision makers, so you have to find a way of approaching them before you get to the women. So that's another level. Without advocacy, without face-to-face interaction, you will not be able to make all this known. But for us, we find that advocacy is very key. It's an education platform, it's a sensitization platform, it is where you empower people. It's not everyone that has access to the information that we have that we are talking about here. So it's through advocacy that we're making known to people. And this one platform for advocacy. Today people will find out that, okay, in Upper West Region, this is what is happening. Or these are the interventions, or these are even the reasons why we are doing the things we're doing. Some people don't even know that what they are doing, abusing women, it's wrong. That's because we have normalized it, so they can think about it and say that, okay, no. Today she's mentioned, because we talk about that, it's very important. Male involvement is very important in addressing gender-based violence. Now today she's been able to highlight how important it was and what success stories that they have. So when you go to another community, you can say that, okay, based on advocacy activities in this place, this is what we found out. What can we do? How can we implement the same thing in another community? So this is how effective advocacy tools are in addressing issues of sexual and gender-based violence.
So the severity and the effects of gender-based violence on survivors. I say survivors because we can have a few men in the equation. So could be very harsh and dire.
It's very harsh and dire.
Yes. So how do we make it less severe for the women? I mean, apart from doing research, conducting research to inform policy, advocacy and all that, how then do we mitigate these forms of violence or even the effects on the survivors?
Okay, so starting from the effects can never be made less, because if somebody is raped, for example, there's no way you can make the person's life better, because the emotional torture the person goes through, if there are injuries, some lose their wombs, some become disabled. How do you make the pain less for that person? So for example, somebody gets pregnant, he loses the education. How do you make it easier for the person? But if these happens, they actually have in place. So for example, counseling is very key. Research shows that if somebody is sexually abused and the person does not get help in forms of counseling and all that, it takes over 30 years for them to be able to come back to their normal self. So that's like imprisonment for 30 years, like sending somebody to jail.
Some maybe don't snap out of it.
Yes, so forever, the person lives in that mental, so whatever goes wrong, oh, it's because I was raped. Whatever happens, oh, it's because of this and that, and because I was abused. And the words we use, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, is that you will not amount to anything. So the person faces a challenge, they said I will not amount to anything. So you can never make those impacts less. But counseling is very key. How to offer, what to tell them, how to build your self-confidence again, bring them back to normal, let them understand that, okay, there's nothing wrong with you. Abuse is never the survivor's fault. It's always the perpetrator's fault. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse is because the man or the woman that did it knows that they can get away with it. That's how come they did it. It's not because there's something wrong with you. We have babies as young as 3 months who are raped. We have in Arab countries where women are covered from head to toe. They are harassed, they are raped. So you can't use dress code and all those things as an excuse. So it's never your fault. It's because they know they can do it to you and they have access to you. That's how come they do that. It's not because you are the wrong place, because you can be walking out, you can be raped in the house by your father, where you are the wrong place. Your home is supposed to be the safest space. How to make it less is for us as a society to generally reduce the incidence and the frequency of it. It's for us as a society first to understand that these things that we do to women and children has consequences. It has consequences for the individual, for the society, and then for the entire country. So there are researches now that look at economic cost of gender-based violence. How much government spends on treating health-related issues. How much institutions lose because forms of psychological abuse, health problems that come. You take time off work. Your employer loses because you are not at work because there's low productivity and all that. In the home, breadwinners are dying. Mothers who are supposed to be taking care of the home are dying from all this. They get sick, they can't go to work and feed. So there's a huge cost. So if we're able to understand, so one thing that we don't really have much data on is the cost of gender-based violence to us as a country, as a society, and in our homes. If we're able to make this data available, it's also going to be very important for us. So if we're able to accept as a society and a lot of advocacy and education, let people understand that this is the kind of support available to me. Because a number of us walk around thinking that I cannot get help. Everybody thinks it's normal, so when I come, I will not get help. Let people understand that there's help for you wherever you need it. But where is this help? How can I access this help? There are people that don't know that they can call a toll-free line and then they can get help and all that. I was very happy to see a post on social media recently where a guy said that the Ghana Police highway line, there was a violence-related case they called and they showed up. So it means that we are doing something about. But how well do people know about this? Where are these support structures that we have? A number of them are in Accra. Yeah. And then these things are happening in Upper West. These things are happening in Central Region and all those. If anything at all, the poverty endemic regions do not have those structures except those two that may be available. So how do we make all these things available? How do we build trust in the system and in women to let them know that, okay, you can get this help? Another key thing is male involvement. I bet you if a man finds out that his daughter has been sexually abused, he'll go mad. If you rape his daughter, he's angry and everything. If men take the forefront, their fellow men listen better. That's what we found out. My research area is in masculinities, and we realized that they understand their language. They have a code language. Men have their own language. So if one man identifies and is able to educate fellow men, he's able to bring them on board more. So how do we get men on board? Instead of making men a problem, problem is because we've created a problem for them as a society, making them feel all powerful, and then they can do a whole lot of things. Some men don't even want to abuse, but their colleagues will tell you, you're a weak man. If a woman comes to you, there's no free lunch. Hey, so you watch her come and sit on your bed and she left like that. So then it makes you feel like he's less of a man. But if he understands that if he doesn't do those things, it doesn't take his masculinity away from him. So there's a need for us to educate men and bring them on board. Being the decision makers of the home. If a man says, in my house, there's no way there's going to be any form of abuse against our children, it's more likely to hold than the wife trying to reverse it, because he's the one. We've made the structure so that he's the authority in the home. So there's a need for us to bring men on board as well. We should not just problematize them, but let them know that they can be part of the solution and we can make a headway out of it.
Okay. So one thing I know has been some efforts made by governments in time past. I remember the one-stop shop building for to address these issues, gender-based violence. I learned now it's complete, but I'm it's yet to be functional or operational. We have the Domestic Violence Act. The UNFPA too has been supporting this effort over the years. I know of the second lady, the wife of the Vice President, Samira Baumia, with her COPASH initiative, all to address gender-based violence. I shudder to say whether we have enough safe homes, whether we have funding to empower these women to ensure that they don't go back to their abusive spaces. Do we have enough safe spaces? I would ask you, Hikmat, whether you have enough safe spaces in the Upper West region, for instance, you have, so that when a woman feels abused, or and it's even evident that the woman has been abused, they can be relocated to these safe spaces and empowered with some form of a skill to probably work and earn some monies for themselves. I don't know whether that exists.
Okay, thank you very much. In the Upper West region, and we all also know that economic empowerment to survivors is very necessary, especially if you want them to recover from their traumatized situations. But in the Upper West region, there is nothing like safe space for women or survivors of violence to get some skills to maybe earn a living or something. There is nothing like that.
There's nothing like that. Not even the presence of DOFSU?
There is a DOFSU, all right. There is an office for DOFSU, but even
is it centralized that people can access?
No,
or it's far from? Okay.
It's in the Upper West region and it's in one municipal. And even when issues are reported to these people, they are not, I don't know, like they feel reluctant in addressing them. They don't really put the seriousness it deserves because people's lives are in danger and they are not really doing, they are not impressing me. That's what I was saying.
Okay, so I mean, victims may as well not go and report.
Yes, exactly. They'll go through stress. And they will be requiring them to pay some amount of money. Someone who is abused and the person is even in a state, I don't know, but like, they are not impressing me.
So, Dr. Ojo, you earlier shared with me some UNICEF programs that they've implemented, some humanitarian programs that they've implemented to mitigate the risk factors associated with gender-based violence. Can you share with us briefly, and then maybe the policymakers listening out there would adapt a lesson or two to implement?
I think we have a lot of documents as a country to address issues of sexual and gender-based violence. It's about the willingness and readiness for us to do it. So she says they are not impressing her. Yes, they are not. Because, and as I also mentioned, that they are members of society, so they've internalized these messages. So what measures are we also putting in place so that they deal with these biases when they find themselves in those spaces? Because until they do that, they will not be able to address them. Because we are used to these issues and how they come up and all those things. And then mentioning UNICEF, UNFPA, we realize that a number of our activities are donor supported. Those things are not generating from within, so we don't have ownership. How well do we own these messages, these issues that we want to address, and how to go by them? Are the ministries not aware of the things that need to be done? I'm very sure that they are, because we have, UNFP has done a lot of work. In Central Region, for example, my center last year, 2020 to 2021, did a midterm review of adolescent reproductive health and sexual and gender-based violence. You see that they've done a whole lot of work, training these policy makers, training religious leaders, traditional leaders on how to create safe spaces for women and men. And one of the key things they look at is how a whole country or society owns the issues and how they want to address it. Okay. Then the commitment to it. That's one thing I also mentioned. How committed are we as a country to solve it? And personally, as she said, she's not impressed. I'm not impressed with our commitment. Another thing is also that we've made this issue a women-led issue. But gender-based violence addressing and mitigating is not a woman-led issue. It's a society-wide led issue. When there is issues of death and it affects boys and girls. If there's no mother, or if the father goes to jail, it affects both women and men. Okay. If there's a loss at the workplace and all that, it will not say because the man is not there, but because we lost a staff with no gender to it. So there's a need for us to be committed as a society to have all of us. And our structures and institutions, one of the targets that they look at, what are the structures and institutions available? So we find out that we do not even have enough shelters as a country where people can go to when they need help. So is it that we don't want to have shelters, or we are not committed enough to want to have those shelters? Those shelters that we find are readily available are privately owned. ARC Foundation, PILSEP having the one-stop center is supposed to have a shelter. The Orange Support Center is UNFPA funded. Yeah. So as a country, what are we doing? What is our commitment? What is our readiness to make sure that these things work and all that is very important. Then as we've been talking, we've always made it look as if GBV is just male to female, an activity that is more like a man to woman, perpetrated by women. Women also we have women gatekeepers. Okay. When it comes to female genital mutilation, who are the ones that do it? Women. If we come home and the men's authority in their homes is mostly couched, it also gives some level of power to so the patriarchals, that we call them patriarchal princesses. So people that are gatekeepers and make sure that whatever exists in society exists. Go and tell a woman and say like, this is something normal. Go and talk to your mother. Don't worry, your father was like that. Yeah. So he will change. And all those things. So these are some of the things. Commitment. What are the institutional structures? What are the societal structures that exist? Are what is important for us.
So I'm told we are supposed to wrap up, but when I come back to you, Dr. Audrey, you should probably tell us what a woman needs to do when they are facing any kind of violence, where they need to go and persist till they get some result. Hikmat, can you tell us your final words? I mean, you are a youth activist. You have advocated against gender-based violence in the Upper West region. Can you share with us your final words? If they are watching you from the Upper West region, maybe they would begin to change.
Like, I would really be impressed if the government of Ghana and policymakers really invest into issues about gender equality and also women's rights issues. This will help especially people who are advocating against gender-based violence issues or issues against women to really achieve their aims and to really help in addressing the issues of violence against women. And I'll really be grateful if these policymakers can reform some of their policies to be in favor of women and survivors of gender-based violence, and the governmental institutions which are supposed to address these issues should really be up to task to help address the issues.
I mean, it's more of a behavioral issue, so I'm praying that, I mean, as much as we advocate, we get some changes that we desire. Dr. Audrey, your final words.
I would say that whoever is going through violence, there's help. Okay, but so where to get help is what is important. Sometimes we tend to think, okay, let me talk to my pastor, but where you get help from is important. You don't know what ideals or ideas your pastor holds. So please first get institutional support. After you get that help, you can come back to your pastor. So you can call DOFSU.
Also the Boame app by UNFPA. You can install it on your phone, and then they can guide you. They can even link you with a lawyer who can help you. But it all depends on the fund. I mean, it's supposed to be free, but I mean, to some extent.
Yeah, but not a number of us that need help have smartphones and all those things, and it works on certain smartphones or not. So just call. I know 18555 is one line you can call, and also 055 1900. You call first, whatever they say, then you can get the support of your pastor, of one leader, of a friend in your church, because where you go to first is very important in seeking help and getting the processes.
Thank you so much, lovely ladies. How much I wish we wouldn't end this conversation because it's getting much interesting. My guest today has been Dr. Amanda Odwe. She's seated on my far left. She's a research fellow at the Center for Gender Research, Advocacy and Documentation. And she drove all the way from Cape Coast just to join us today. And I can't express my appreciation enough. She's also a fellow at the Center for Social Justice. Thank you so much for joining us. We also had Miss Hikmat Sungdeme Sani. We have a Sani in our office. Sungdeme Sani. She's the founder of Hik Sung Joy Foundation to provide some form of avenue for the voiceless or women who survivors of domestic or gender-based violence to speak up and also to get help. She's also a youth activist, a social entrepreneur, a graphic designer, and the founder of Sung Shito. If you're a student, you should grab one, and I'm sure you enjoy it. Yeah. She's also a level 300 student at the University of Ghana who's been doing so much work in the Upper West region to help women to be assertive, to know their rights, to know when to speak up. Thank you so much for joining us at home. We couldn't make time for you to join us via the phones, but we hope you picked some notes to implement. Thank you so much for joining us. See you same time on Wednesday.